The wrong house. Arthur always thought he was the smartest man in the room, especially when he was plotting behind my back. We had been married for 7 years, and for the last 3, I felt like I was living with a stranger. He became obsessed with money, constantly chasing get-rich-quick schemes and talking about legacy. But Arthur didn't want to work for a legacy, he wanted to steal one. The turning point came when my grandfather passed away. Everyone in the family knew Grandpa owned 2 major properties outside the city. The first was a beautiful, historic Victorian estate sitting on prime real estate, worth millions. The second was a crumbling, abandoned farmhouse on a worthless patch of swampy land that we hadn't visited in decades. Because the addresses were incredibly similar, differing by just a single letter on the old county plot maps, my grandfather used to joke that only a fool could mix them up. Arthur was that fool. Driven by greed, Arthur secretly managed to forge my signature on a power of attorney document. He spent months sneaking around, whispering on the phone, and meeting with a shady offshore developer who was known for buying properties quickly, in cash, with no questions asked. Arthur's plan was deeply malicious. He intended to sell the $1 million Victorian estate illegally, pocket the massive cash payout into a secret. I actually discovered his plan a week before the final signature. I found the forged documents hidden in his golf bag. My heart broke, but instead of screaming, I decided to let him play his game. What Arthur didn't realize was that in his manic rush to steal my inheritance, he had misread the confusing old deed registries. He had copied the parcel number for the worthless, sinking swamp house, believing it was the luxury estate. I chose to stay completely silent and let greed blind him. The day of the closing, Arthur told me he was going to a business conference out of town. In reality, he was sitting in a dim boardroom with a corrupt buyer, signing away what he thought was my crown jewel. To make the deal happen instantly and secretly, the buyer demanded a massive upfront collateral. Arthur was so confident in his stolen millions that he did something incredibly reckless. He emptied our entire joint life savings, liquidated his own retirement fund, and even took out a massive, fraudulent hard money loan against our actual marital home to pay the buyer's transaction and securing fees. He put every single penny he owned on the line, believing he would multiply it by 10 a few hours later. The papers were signed, the wire transfers were initiated, and Arthur walked out of the office feeling like a king. He immediately sent me a cold, heartless text message saying he was leaving me, changing his phone number right after. He drove straight to a luxury hotel, ordered the most expensive champagne, and waited for the millions to hit his account. The next morning, the nightmare began for Arthur. The offshore developers team went to inspect their newly acquired multi-million-dollar property, only to find themselves standing in front of a collapsed, rotting shack sinking into a muddy swamp. They realized they had been sold a worthless piece of junk land. Simultaneously, Arthur opened his banking app, expecting to see a fortune. Instead, he saw zero. The wire transfer from the buyers had been frozen and flagged for fraud because the property description didn't match the luxury estate they thought they were buying. Even worse, the shady buyers weren't the type of people you could cheat. When they realized they had been handed a swamp, they immediately pulled back their funds and executed the strict clauses in the contract Arthur had blindly signed. Because Arthur had used his own assets, retirement, and our marital home as collateral to guarantee the deal, the predatory loan sharks and the buyers legally seized everything. In less than 24 hours, Arthur lost the stolen property, lost the cash, and lost his own life savings. Because the fraud was so poorly executed, the bank automatically alerted the authorities about the forged power of attorney. When Arthur finally crawled back to our home to beg for forgiveness, he found the locks changed. Standing on the porch was a sheriff's deputy serving him with divorce papers and a warrant for grand theft and forgery. He had tried to steal my future, but his own arrogance and greed completely consumed him. By trying to leave me with nothing, Arthur ended up with exactly what he deserved. Absolute nothingness, facing a prison sentence, and realizing he had destroyed his entire life for a piece of sinking swamp.